right, everyone, welcome back to the land of Chem. I'm your host and the author. My name is Jeffrey Drum. Thank you all so much for joining me again.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Now, today we will dive into the fascinating presentation by SAR team member Armando MEI at the recent Malta conference, explaining his research on the timeline of ancient civilizations and the construction of the Egyptian pyramids, and some critical revelations regarding the numerology of 137 and its connection to the central pyramid. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. I think that's it for today's intro, so without further ado, let's get right to it. All right, everyone, here we go with tonight's episode. Now, to begin, Armando presents several important details surrounding the numerology of 137. But there was one thing in particular that stood out for me, as it directly connects to my research on the function of the Egyptian pyramids as related to physics and chemistry, which is the presence of this deeply esoteric number within the fine structure constant, with a nice summary of its significance here. In essence, the fine structure constant is a fundamental parameter that shapes the universe as we know it, influencing everything from the structure of atoms to the behavior of stars and the very possibility of life. And I'll give you some quick background information as to why this is such an important number and how it is directly associated with my work on the physics and chemistry-based technology of the Egyptian pyramids. Starting here, the fine structure constant, approximately equal to 1 over 137, is a fundamental constant in physics that describes the strength of electromagnetic force. It is a dimensionless number, meaning it doesn't depend on units, and it appears in various formulas related to how charged particles interact with electromagnetic fields. While not directly a chemical constant, it plays a crucial role in understanding atomic structure and chemical bonding, as it influences the behaviors of electrons within atoms. What is the fine structure constant, which is often denoted by the Greek letter alpha? It's a fundamental constant that quantifies the strength of the electromagnetic interaction. Why does it matter? It determines how strongly charged particles like electrons interact with electromagnetic fields, influencing the behavior of atoms and molecules. And its significance in chemistry, it affects the energy levels of electrons in atoms, which in turn influences the properties of chemical bonds and the overall behavior of molecules. Sounds significant. More here. It is a constant that plays a crucial role in both physics and chemistry, particularly in understanding the electromagnetic force and atomic structure. It essentially dictates the strength of the interaction between charged particles and the electromagnetic field. Why it's relevant to chemistry? The fine structure constant, denoted by the Greek letter alpha, as mentioned before, is a measure of electromagnetic force strength. This force governs how atoms interact, forming molecules and determining the behavior of chemical reactions. Furthermore, Armando highlights some connection to ancient Kabbalistic traditions, as mentioned here. In Kabbalah, a Jewish mystical tradition, the number 137 is believed to have deep spiritual significance, potentially relating to creation and divine order. Furthermore, as stated here in physics, the fine structure constant, 137, is the inverse of the fine structure constant, which characterizes the strength of electromagnetic interaction, linking the number to fundamental aspects of the universe. 137 is also known as a master number in numerological traditions like 11, 22, and the number 33, and it just so happens that 137 is the 33rd prime number. So in my opinion, encoding the number 137 into the design and proportions of the central pyramid was intended to communicate information and knowledge. As I've said many times before, that these structures are encyclopedias in stone, and one only has to know how to read the text to retrieve all of these ancient secrets. And the builders of these colossal monuments left the central pyramid as a towering, shining beacon attesting to their knowledge of the fundamental properties of physics and chemistry that govern and define the universe as we know it. Discovering 137 within the geometry of the central pyramid was intended to make a statement. This is what we knew. This is what we could do. And this mathematical constant is telling you exactly what these pyramids were for. The implementation of physics, specifically those of electric fields, as integrated with chemistry to achieve miraculous transformations within these structures in the same way as physics and chemistry define and shape our universe. And this is one of the primary reasons that the central pyramid was chosen for the symbol and logo of the land of Chem, a testament to the knowledge, capabilities, and chemistry of this ancient civilization. So now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I hope you enjoy the presentation by SAR team member Armando MEI and his tremendous research on the timeline of ancient civilizations and the numerology of the Giza pyramids.
We'll stay here in Malta for this very amazing examples and thank you all for attending this conference. Today I share insight from my historical and archaeological research, and my work has consistently pursued a singular objective: to understand through rigorous scientific analytical models the pivotal events that may have shaped our remote past, and consequently the evolution of our species. And my investigation have delved into profound question where iconic archaeological sites such as the Giza plateau, for example, that hold the potential correlation with an as yet undiscovered. This endeavor necessitates a meticulous deconstruction through the interdisciplinary study of ancient myth and archaeologically significant regions. By integrating diverse methodological approaches, including historical analysis, archaeological excavations, and scientific modeling, I'm to unravel previously recognized narratives that will redefine our understanding of human origins and the early civilization. To understand the origins of ancient being and the evolution of human civilization, we need a robust framework. And my approach focuses on the intersection of symbolic narratives, material culture, and historical processes, utilizing three key methods. The first, the myth, even with their symbolic layers, often retains echoes of historical memory. And by analyzing their structures and recurring themes, we can begin to reconstruct a timeline on significant events that may have shaped early human experiences. The second point are the study of the archetypes. The archetypes as universal symbols across cultures that offers deep insight into the collective human unconscious. Recognizing these patterns help us to interpret myth not just as cultural products, but as a reflection of shared human experiences and transformations over time. The third point is the iconic site, with its monumental architecture and astronomical elements, likely holds crucial physical and symbolical clues. A detailed multidisciplinary examination of Giza could reveal aspects of ancient knowledge, intentions, and worldviews, potentially linking mythic tradition of observable phenomena. And these three perspectives provide a framework to explore fundamentally how were early myths formed? What truth might they encode? And how do they relate to our species development and understanding of the world? Let's now explore each more detail. Let's start with the first approach, tracing the chronology of events through myth. While often seen as purely allegorical, myths frequently hold encoded weird memories of real, transformative historical events. When analyzed rigorously, myth can serve as a vital complementary source, revealing a more complete picture of humanity's past, especially when combined with scientific data. Chronology is crucial. Without it, we risk misinterpreting it in this way. When myth aligns with verifiable scientific data, a powerful narrative of survival, memory, and transformation emerges. So consider these three pivotal bonds. About 75,000, 70,000 before Christ, the Toba supervolcano eruption. During the Pleistocene, the Toba eruption in Indonesia caused a global volcanic winter and a severe human population bottleneck. Though not directly recorded in early texts, this apocalyptic event likely echoes in myth of a first destruction or humanity's near obliteration, with ancestral traumas resurfacing similarly in fleet, fire, and rebirth narratives. The second data very important is 36,400 before Christ. It's 8 AD, the first dozen. Egyptian mythology speaks of Tzedkepi, a foundational epoch, traditional seen as mythology. However, it may represent a significant cultural and civilization shift, possibly the emergence of a new order following a prior collapse. Egyptian texts and the king's lists suggest this period marked the dynasty of demigods, including figures like Horus, indicating an encoded reconnection rather than pure legend. And the third date, very important, is 3,500 before Christ. What's happened? Then great thoughts. The 3,500 before Christ is connected with the Great Feast. This date resonates across many ancient traditions, marking the end of the civilization of the gods and the beginning of a new era. Described in Mesopotamia and two Mesoamerican traditions, this cataclysm saw survivors bearing knowledge that laid the groundwork for future civilizations, notably the Sumerian and the Egyptians. By viewing myth as a memory repository and aligning it with the geological, anthropological, and astronomical data, we begin to see not fantasy, but a coded chronicle of real human experience and survival through catastrophes. To better understand ancient events and the myth they inspire, we turn to paleomagnetism and Pleistocene climate dynamics. First, paleomagnetism research shows Earth's geographical axis has naturally oscillated over the last 100,000 years, affecting climate, ocean currents, and migration. While human era shifts are gradual, a major extra variation between 55 and 50 million years ago, during the Eocene thermal maximus, highlights Earth's dynamic nature. This reminds us the ancient myths speaking of worlds of return or lost directions. Thus, direction myths subtly encrypts ancestral memory of such geophysical transformations. even if not immediately perceptible in short bursts. The symbolic language of cosmic disorder or reverse seasons in myth could reflect these shifts. In Egypt, for example, the early Dutch papyrus or the Epoch papyrus are clear manifestation of this ancestral record. Second, the final phase of Pleistocene epoch, 20,000 or 10,000 before Christ, saw intense glaciation and frequent upward climatic fluctuations, especially in northern latitudes. These changes dramatically impacted sea levels, ecosystems, and early human survival. Many myths of destruction, floods, and rivers resonate with these periods. And what seems like metaphorical takes might instead reflect collective efforts to understand the rapidly changing environment shaped by glacial retreats, rising seas, and disrupted migrations. By integrating data from paleomagnetism and Pleistocene climatology, we enrich our understanding of ancient narratives. These myths are not just poetic expression, but potentially encoded responses to real, observable phenomena that shaped both the physical world and the human thought. Now, let's expand on the role of paleomagnets. This period doesn't just tell us about magnetic polarity reversal. It also helps us reconstruct Earth's geological history over millions of years. Paleomagnetism provides objective data on Earth's magnetic field, and by extension, the stability of its geographical axis over time. Crucially, current paramagnetic and geological evidence shows that Earth's axis hasn't significantly deviated, even after the Toba supervolcano eruption around 75,000 years ago. It has consistently stayed within its natural oscillation range over 22.5 and 24.5 degrees of actuator. This is a significant point when considering hypotheses like those suggesting a dramatic shift of Earth's geographical axis in North America, for example, between 70,000 before Christ and 10,000 before Christ. While these ideas sometimes appear in French interpretation of ancient myth, there is no scientific or geological evidence to support such claims. The Earth's axial tilt remained stable within its known range during that period. This distinction is vital. It allows us to separate scientifically validated geophysical events from speculative reconstructions. Knowing what has and hasn't happened help us better interpret mythic content and filter out unsupported theories. Thus, paleomagnetism acts not only as a geological tool, but also as a compass for historical discernment, grounding our exploration of ancient memory in empirical evidence. When tracing ancient memory through myth, we also must address alternative, albeit speculative theories that have had discussion about lost civilizations. One such idea is Charles Hapgood's Earth's crust displacement hypothesis. Hapgood proposed the Earth's outer crust could shift over its underlying mantle, drastically altering a global geography. This theory has been cited as a potential explanation for myth by science, offering a physical mechanism for sudden mass disappearance or submergence that isn't purely symbolic. However, a critical scientific perspective reveals limitations. Current geological and geophysical data showed no substantial evidence for rapid crustal displacement within the past 100,000 years, the time frame relevant to ancient civilizations. Such a massive shift would require an immense external force, like a large celestial impact, for which there's no geological trace during the epochs linked to the myths like Atlantis. Furthermore, Hepwood calculated that any displacement would take around 2,000 years, a duration generally too long to align with the sudden caprices described in many ancient traditions. Thus, while Hepwood's theory presents a theoretical plausible mechanism for a large-scale planetary change, it lacks empirical support and remains speculative when applied to engineer. It serves as a compelling narrative tool, but not a verified scientific explanation. Nevertheless, theories like Hepwood's highlight crucial points. Many myths embody a deep awareness of Earth's dynamic nature, of floods, earthquakes, and lost lands. Ancient peoples likely sought to preserve memories of such events through symbolic frameworks. Our task, therefore, is to dismiss this myth as fiction, but to carefully navigate between the poetic and the prosaic, always grounded in interdisciplinary analysis. Now let's explore how mythical traditions might hold fragments of shared ancient mirror. Plato's myth of Atlantis is a key example. In his dialogue Timaeus and Critias, Plato describes Atlantis as a powerful advanced civilization beyond the fears of Heracles, Straits of Gibraltar. He says it was destroyed by floods and earthquakes due its people's border decay and harvest. While often seen as a allegory, some researchers believe this narrative contains echo of actual history events passed down through oral tradition. This idea finds potential support in Yellow creation texts, for example, this inscription described the primordial island, enacted by divine beings who established order before a devastating flood scatters their knowledge. Some scholars see strong parallels between this mythic flood of Plato's Osireion database, and they suggest both narratives could stem from a common ancestral memory, perhaps reaching back to the Egyptian sectarian firsta. If so, Plato's Atlantis might be a fragment of much older cosmogony legacies, preserved and reinterpreted across culture over millennia. Adding to this discussion are the enigmatic emerald tablets attributed to Thoth or Hermet Trismegistus. These tablets describe a journey of knowledge, a lost homeland, and the survival of wisdom through migration, resonating with Thoth's journey from a destroyed land to the ancient Egypt or the land of Cap. While no original tablets exist, and the earliest known version dates to around 1250 AD, some passages symbolically align with Setapian flood's narratives. Despite their uncertain historical origin, their content echoes sediments from both Rabelais and the Eightfold Text, and this suggests a continuity of archetypal themes: destruction, survival, migration, and the transmission of sacred knowledge. We must approach this connection cautiously, clearly distinguishing between myth, symbolical narrative, and historical data. However, when viewed together, these stories form a mosaic of recurring motifs. They seem to reflect a shared human effort to make sense of profound upheavals, preserving memory in a symbolic code long before modern history writing. In this sense, Atlantis might not just be a lost time, it could be a metaphor of a lost chapter of humanity, partially preserved in being, encoded in ritual, and dimly remembered in text like the Emer tablets. Questa secondo sì. When discussing ancient Egypt and the idea of submerged land masses, a concept echoes in myths like Atlantis, Lemuria, and Poe. It's important to consider both kinds of cataclysmatic events could have caused such inundations. While various large-scale phenomena could theoretically submerge continental areas, certain events align better with ancient myth that depicts populations receiving warnings of empiric disaster. Specifically, large-scale volcanic activity and its associated events, particularly the generation of enormous tsunamis, offer scenarios where events might unfold gradually enough to allow for observation and some form of needed response. This makes them more consistent with myths where warnings and migration precede the disaster. In contrast, phenomena like crust deformation, causing rapid, submerged, massive earthquakes, and tectonic shifts, truly rapid sea level rise, and asteroid or comet impacts in the ocean, for example, would likely unfold with such suddenness and overwhelming force that widespread warning or effective escape would be near impossible. Therefore, when analyzing ancient myth that speaks of warnings and migration before cataclysmic floods or the disappearance of lands, geological events with a more prolonged development, like significant volcanic activity leading to tsunamis, offer a more plausible framework for understanding how such memories and warnings could have been preserved in culturatory sheets. This slide brings us to crucial question about ancient narratives. Some of the most complex ancient texts describe events that are incredibly challenging to interpret. While seemingly mythological, these accounts often strongly resemble descriptions of real historical occurrences, though hidden in symbolical language. A prime example is the text of Earth inscriptions, which detail the downfall of an advanced civilization due to a catastrophe. This leads us to wonder, could these generational accounts cause the same categories found in myths of legendary lost continents like Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu? Furthermore, the timeline suggested by some of these narratives push us to consider the very distant past of our species. Could these seemingly fantastical stories actually preserve a memory of unknown civilizations that flourished as far back 75,000 to 75,000 before Christ? This period, remember, was marked by significant geological upheaval, including the Tuatha de Danann eruption. Finally, we consider the deity Thoth as a figure of immense wisdom in Egyptian mythology. Thus, the mythology surrounding Thoth and his followers mark a critical point in this timeline. Could his arrival in camp symbolize the refuge for survivors of a global catastrophe, a moment when the foundation for a new era of civilization, perhaps the very one that built the magnificent structures we study today, were laid? These are complex questions with no easy answers. However, the way ancient texts align with our growing scientific understanding of Earth's history offers a fascinating path to continued exploration and interdisciplinary discussion. I aim to connect scientific discoveries with ancient stories to propose a possible timeline for events between roughly 7,000 and 36,000 before Christ. This is a working hypothesis, blending mythological accounts with observed scientific phenomena. Our starting point is the late Pleistocene epoch. Understanding its environmental conditions is crucial. Geologic and ferromagnetism reveal a planet with significant glacial activity in the northern hemisphere, and the major events like the Tuatha de Danann volcano eruption around 74,000 years ago. This potentially unstable environment sets the stage for the challenges faced by early human population and any advanced civilizations. Following the late Pleistocene major environmental upheavals like the Tuatha eruption, I hypothesize a new phase of development for what ancient traditions call the civilization of the gods. Around 70,000 before Christ could have been a turning point, a time of recovery and adaptation. Figures like Thoth, known in Egyptian mythology for bringing knowledge, as his followers may have migrated to more stable regions like Kent. And this journey could represent a search for refuge and a way to preserve accumulated knowledge from the widespread destruction of major cataclysms, possibly even events that later contribute to legend of the lost lands like Atlantis. After the arrival and the integration of those survivors with the local population in Kent, our hypothesis suggests that the start of a major reconstruction project. Mythological historical accounts, particularly those deeply to Zeppeli, the first time of the Golden Age in Egyptian traditions, describe the beginning of the myth. Intriguingly, the controversial emerald tablets hints at created deep shafts to bring the light and life to a mansion. We propose these references might correspond to the deep shafts as subterranean structures beneath the Giza plateau, which modern SAR technology has measured the standing up to 1.2 kilometers deep. This suggests a very early and sophisticated undertaking, possibly a deliberate effort to establish a significant center of knowledge and power in this new era after a global collapse. This proposed chronological sequence from the late Pleistocene environment to potential yearly construction at Giza is a framework for further research. In attempts to bridge the gap between the symbolic language of ancient myth and tangible scientific evidence, offering a new perspective on our planet's remote history and the enduring legacy of a past civilization. Some of the most intricate and enigmatic ancient texts recount events that defy easy interpretation. These narratives, often dismissed as purely mythological, may, upon closer examination, preserve distant memories of real historical occurrences. A compelling example is found in the text of Maeve, which describes the existence of an advanced civilization obliterated by cataclysm of immense scale. Such accounts invite us to consider: are we encountering symbolic allegories or encoded recollections of actual long-forgotten events? Could these stories be vestiges of the same catastrophic upheaval that marks the demise of the fabled civilization of Atlantis, Lemuria, or Mu? Might they point to the extinction of unknown cultures that flourished between 75,000 and 70,000 before Christ, here beyond the reach of controversial historiography? Particularly evocative is the myth of the god Thoth. Could his arrival in the land of Khem symbolize not merely a divine act, but the resettlement of survivors, custodians of lost knowledge, who laid the intellectual and spiritual foundations for a new epoch in human history. I propose that fragments of myths may in fact constitute preserved memories.
All right, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the video. And if you are interested in the ancient technology of a lost civilization utilizing physics and chemistry and the function of the Egyptian pyramids and other ancient structures from across the world, please remember to subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube so you don't miss out on the new episodes that premiere twice per week. If you want to help support the channel, check out thelandofchem.com. You can pick up a copy of the book or grab some merch, link in the video description below. And if you want to get access to exclusive research videos, check out the Land of Chem members only channel, now up to 22 absolutely massive research episodes that also feature some unreleased expedition footage. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video.
Molecular remnants of profound historical transformations that shaped the course of the early civilization. Could this be the era in which the god war among men, as vividly described in ancient Egyptian mythology? Might this be the time where the first teachings were imparted to the early peoples of Egypt, communities that gradually transitioned from nomadic lifestyle to settled societies under the guidance of these divine figures? Could this also be the period during which the city of Amenti was constructed, following the architectural and symbolic design described in the Egyptian Book of Dead, wherein Amenti is said to be divided into 12 sacred compartments or compounds, each associated with specific trials and transformations? Is this, moreover, the epoch when the divine conflict began, the struggle between Osiris and Set, a cosmic confrontation that would ultimately culminate in the Battle of Carrowkeel and the final defeat of Set and his followers, the Sepau? And who were the Sepau? Were they perhaps the Cynocephali, beings often depicted with dog-like or baboon-like heads? Could they have any correlation with the Neanderthals, considering that the anthropological description of the Neanderthal cranial morphology bears striking similarities to that of the yellow baboon or Papio-Cynocephalus? And might the defeat of Set and the extermination of his followers in the Red of Jeru, as recounted in the Book of Dead, serve as a symbolic record, a mytho-historical memory of the extinction of the Neanderthal species? Let's consider how mythological narrative offer compelling and coherent answer to this question. The Book of Death recounts a profound struggle, the war among the gods, and the hearts of this conflict stands Set, who launches a formidable assault upon Heliopollis, seeking dominion over its sacred domain. Yet the divine order doesn't yet. The gods, stirred by righteous fury and interpreted to restore balance, rise in defense of the Sabbath. This is how Zep-Tepi the first time begins, a hallowed epoch of divine presence, restoration, and renewal. Central to this era is the pattern for control over the shafts of orbs in Heliopolis. Twice Set and his courts attempt to capture this, the separate night in which Osiris transfers his divine authority to his own courts, thus inaugurating the Zep-Tepi. This epoch marks the transition towards the age of the Pyramids, regarded as the culminating act in the grand construction of Amenti, the subterranean city of light and initiation. Following the defeat of the Sebau and Set, the surviving remnants are brought to the land of Jedu, the very place of the jet pillar, which is associated with the pyramids of Giza. There, before the great judges of Abydos, they undergo a terrifying metamorphosis into animalistic form, relentlessly annihilating the remaining survivors until their last drop of blood is shed. Thus, the Order of the Gods concludes. This narrative, rich of symbolic violence and divine judgments, offered a glimpse into the profound cosmic and terrestrial struggles believed to have shaped this epochal shift. One of the primary objectives in this historical inquiry has been to precisely determine when these events unfold. We know that certain artifacts discovered in Egypt suggest a remarkably ancient origin for Egyptian civilization. The Tuatha papyrus, for instance, and indirectly the inventory state, which mentions the presence of the Sphinx at the Great Pyramid Ayawatu, points to a Neolithic timeline. Naturally, Egyptologists have largely dismissed these documents as unreliable, but is it truly certain that the history of ancient Egypt did not begin earlier than conventionally accepted, as some passages in ancient myths suggest? One of the most significant developments in the last 40 years of research has been Uriah porosity. For better or worse, it's been the only study that, by synthesizing myths and ancient Egyptian astronomy within a multidisciplinary framework, has contributed to a profound re-evaluation of the Nile civilization origins. Robert Bauval, for example, proposes a possible azimuthal alignment of the pyramids and Sphinx with the celestial pole, using this astronomical map. This approach attempts to give meaning to ancient mythology, the Egyptian incredible astronomical knowledge, and the position and structure of the Giza mountain. What are the limitations of his theory? Firstly, the theory considers only the pyramid and the Sphinx, failing to account for the existence of other potential monuments that might be part of a global disaster. Secondly, Bauval excludes the possibility that the alignment occurred in even more remote epochs, specifically during the Zephyr or the Age of the Gods. This is because, as he admits, he intentionally adopts currently accepted rules regarding human evolution. While these are certainly important considerations, what if they are incorrect? How can we integrate and cover the limitation of the correlation theory? Let's examine the astronomical map. We are looking at the spring equinox at 10,400 before price, the map as much of visualize like this. Bauval identifies this time frame due to the Sphinx layering appearance and considers the monument an equinoctial indicator, a time marker. Therefore, he posits a relationship between the Sphinx and the constellation Orion. For this same reason, he identifies the same alignment in the star patterns of Orion's belt with the pyramids, seeing them as a reflection of the sky. As we would see, this hypothesis is not entirely correct, except for its basic principles, but not in its temporal calculations. The map we are examining predates Bauval's by a precessional cycle. Stemming from a fundamental consideration, do other monuments on the Giza plateau form parts of a global project? Must be easily interpreted in its entirety from east to west. My work has precisely focused on identifying new monuments that are consistently compatible with the architecture of the pyramids and sphinx, exhibiting features different than the pyramids and sphinx, but compatible to the concept of megalithic structure. Among his monuments, I had identified the promontory upon which the mastaba of Kenkawa's country rests in the east, southeast, the valley temples of the Sphinx, the temple of Amenhotep II to the left of the Sphinx, and the tomb of the Birds or NC2 located to the west of the Giza plateau. All these monuments demonstrate an interrelationship based on three principal mathematical constants, pi, phi, and epsilon, and the perfect astronomical correlation. These analytical mathematical elements are comprehensively described in my book, 36,400 before Christ. Now let us examine the map. This represents the celestial bolt as it appeared at the vernal light max in 36,400 before Christ. The sun is at the dawn, while the constellation Leos precisely to the east, directly opposite the Sphinx, and at the same angular orientation as the monument relative to the east. The position of the Orion constellation is perfectly on the celestial meridian. Of particular interest is the precise placement of the star Almita, the largest star in Orion's belt, which is perpendicularly aligned with the Great Pyramid, the largest among the pyramids of the Giza plateau. In the curvature of Bovals, on the meridian is the star Intaka, that is connecting incorrectly with the Great Pit. That is why, in my opinion, the correlation proposed by Boba is incorrect. Equally, noteworthy is the position of the star Sirius and the Canis Major constellation. In Mobile's alignment, Sirius was below the celestial rising and therefore invisible. Symbolically, the presence of Sirius associated with the goddess Isis is fundamentally important, as the goddess played a crucial role in the history of the Zeteti as described in the Egyptian. Furthermore, it is extraordinary to observe the presence of the planets that play a basic role in this alignment. All are aligned along the ecliptic, the green line, and two of these, Mercury and Jupiter, are in conjunction with the star Regulus. This conjunction is best covered in the position of the valley temples of the Sphinx, which are directly connected to the monument itself. So the Sphinx and the two temples, Granus and the two pillars. Finally, it is important to note the western position of Saturn, the planet associated with the death or repose, which is precisely to the west, uniquely situated in a different area of the sky. This too represents a fundamental symbolic aspect. In opposition to the constellation of Rio, we ultimately find the constellation of Albanus, which is located in correspondence with the tomb of the birds, the NC2, positioned to the west of the Sphinx. What is an interesting point of line is also the connection with the position of Saturn in the western quadrant with the Hebrew traditions that seems to be dated with the Septepi, because the Saturday is the day of the rest and the day of feast for the Hebrew tradition. This is another basic point that I believe must establish very deep. The ultimate conclusion that emerged is that the Giza plateau must most likely be interpreted through a global and archaeocosmological perspective to achieve the most accurate understanding. This approach aligns with the origin of the separate design of the Giza plateau, according to the classic writers such as Manetho, for example, or Herodotus, Giotto Cicello, Giuseppe Flavio, and so on, and according to some interesting artifacts like the papyrus of Turin or royal cap that dates back to 36,400 before Christ, a period in which a highly advanced civilization encoded its astronomical, spiritual, and initiatic knowledge within the monumental architecture and topographical alignments of the Earth. To the east, the correlation lies between the Sphinx and the constellation in Deer, a symbolic union that evokes the rising of the sun in the age of Deer, precisely aligned with the beginning of the processional type postulated in the 36,400 before Christ framework. The temples near the Sphinx show significant alignments with the planets Mercury and Jupiter, suggesting a deliberate encoding of celestial mechanics and planetary influence in the subtle geometry of the complex. I want also underline an important detail that refers to the two temples beneath the Pleiades, because their summit developed according to the sites, some parameters of the two planets, Mercury and Jupiter. So some parameters of the planets processing by a mathematical model gives as results exactly the dimensions of the tables, and according to constants, the phi and phi. That is why the temples could be connected with the planets Jupiter and Mercury. There is a mathematical result that suggests the possible connection between the temples and the planets. To the south, the constellation of Orion, long associated with the gods of Osiris and the mystery of resurrection, is directly reflected in the layout of the three pyramids, supporting the notion that Giza was conceived as a stellar map on it. Meanwhile, the star series, closely tied to Gondes Isis in the Egyptian calendar, corresponds with a spiral-shaped promontory where the mastable Centauri stands, a symbolic location possibly marking the sacred fending principle in the terrestrial replication of the sky. To the west, the constellation of Aquarius is linked to the enigmatic tomb of birds. These structures present intriguing evidence of water erosion and sodium deposits, strongly suggesting it once functioned as an underground saltwater basin, part of a wider hydraulic network connected to the megalithic substructure beneath the Giza plateau. In this case, it is interesting to underline another aspect that is very important. In 1923, German geologist Max Blackenau discovered the clues of an ancient river connecting the Mediterranean Sea with the desert of Egypt and Libya desert, may be connected also with the Giza plateau. And in 1929, two geologists from the Chicago University, their name is Sanford and Darko, they were geologists, discovered in the region of Fayul, that is characterized by salt water, several channels conduits that goes toward north, conducting salt water to the north, probably towards Giza. That is why it's very important the function of the tube of the birds, its channel conduits in the underground, and the presence of sodium on the wall. All these astronomical correlation, architectural elements, and geophysical features are not random. They reflect a coherent, complex plan rooted in primordial science and cosmic consciousness, pointing back to the golden age of knowledge, precisely at 36,400 before Christ. It is within this context that the Giza plateau must be understood, not merely as a funerary complex of the 4th dynasty, but as a cosmic archaea encoded by a forgotten civilization whose legacy continues to shape human consciousness across time. Why I am convinced that the pyramids were not constructed during the dynastic period. Firstly, this conviction steps for their unique architectural characteristics, the specific type of blocks utilized, and the limited quality of tools available to the ancient Egyptians. More significantly, it is supported by the complete absence of funerary remains, which have never been found within the pyramids. Furthermore, there is a total lack of descriptions, with the singular exception of the Pisces cartouche. The finding that only Zaki Awas continues to assert tooth as original. Finally, scientific evidence also provides very precise insights. Carbon-14 dating, for instance, performed on certain organic artifacts discovered along the pyramid of Khufu, yields data that is truly inconsistent with conventional logic. To the extent that, according to results that from analysis laboratories in Switzerland and in the United States, the lower part of the pyramids was constructed after its upper section. So it is, of course, incorrect. In essence, there is no serious method for obtaining precise information about these methods, other than by employing multidisciplinary models and advanced technology. The PED is the only patent for. Of course, such an approach must be comparable with the study and analysis required for particularly complex structures. I like muon technology, for example, which in 10 years has produced no scientifically relevant results, only announcement devoid of objective evidence. What do I mean by a multidisciplinary model? And what are the bases upon which to propose an analytical plan that could lead to objectively relevant results? First and foremost, it is essential to enter in the minds of Giza's people. If the civilization that created these monuments was indeed an advanced one, then we must endeavor to understand its language and what could be the most effective approach. The phonetic form. This involves exploring primordial scripts and mentally integrated into the monuments themselves. The challenge here lies in identifying a comprehensible alphabet form, as has been the case with MEI, particularly in South America, which bear completely unknown languages. Therefore, the superior approach is to study the relationship between numbers and monuments. And this means the number as the device of the universal language, employed as a means of communication that transcends space and time. But also astronomy, fundamental for immortalizing the first time of the gods through the alignments of monuments with the celestial world, an ingenious act by which the builders eternally inscribed their presence in the story of these planets. And the geometry, from the most elementary to the most complex forms. The monuments echoed the fundamental constants underpinning the development of mathematical geometry studies. And finally, the language of archetypes, through which the designer of the Giza project hermetically transmitted the scientific knowledge of the lost civilization that appeared in the monumental complex. Through archetypal language, clues have been passed down regarding the possible function of the Giza complex. Let us begin with the Pyramid of Khafre to understand how, even in the past, attempts were made with limited success to apply this type of scientific approach. That is to study monuments using techniques that proved ill-suited to the monuments themselves. Therefore, it is crucial to understand that before embarking on such complex investigative projects, one must first comprehend the nature of the subjects being examined. What follows are just a few of the most significant historical examples concerning exploration of the Pyramid of Khafre. The first person believed to have entered the interior of the second Pyramid of Giza was Giovanni Perizot in 1880, while the first to thoroughly explore it was John Peart in 1837. In June 1996, Professor Luis Alvarez published an article in the scientific journal Washington Meeting, issued by the American Physical Society, on the topic Search for Hidden Chambers in the Pyramids, the structure of the second Pyramid of Giza, determined by cosmic ray absorption. The results proved inconclusive, as the techniques employed were not compatible with the needs for discovering new chambers within the monuments. In 2016, a similar test was organized by the Church and Society Foundation, partially funded by Arconic Foundation and Motorola Solution Foundation. The result indicated the presence of a possible void space approximately 72 meters from the Bezzoli chamber, but it was never found. Also in 2016, at the Multidisciplinary Civil Engineering Architecture and Urban Planning Symposium, researchers Valdis Sediens and Agnese Kukela from the Lithuanian University, Riga University, presented the study titled Unknown Deformations on the Facade of the Pyramid of Khafre in the Giza Pyramid Complex. They observed the subsidence of certain blocks along the southwest course. From this, they deduced the potential presence of void spaces within the pyramid. In actual facts, this hypothesis was never subsequently pushed. This model suggests that the most correct approach is always the simplest one, because an advanced civilization leaves simple messages for those who can comprehend them in the future. And now let us examine what these messages are that have been left for us. These are the three pyramids of Giza and their respective complexes, viewed from above. At first glance, they appeared as massive wedges thrust into the golden skin of the deserts, an impression that, though seemingly superficial, ignited in me a profound reflection. The wedge, in its very essence, is a symbol of penetration, division, and decoding, the conceptual key that invites one to decode what lies beneath the surface. Driven by this intuition, I began an exercise that was both playful and methodical. I drew lines extending from the base of each major monument towards the winged spirits, tracing invisible vectors across the landscape. Inversely, I drew lines from the corners of the quartz pyramids towards the cardinal directions to which they are aligned. The resulting pattern surprised me, and it did not resemble random geometry, or arbitrary alignment. Instead, it began to take the form of something strangely familiar, a visual system that encodes in no language. To my astonishment, the geometrical configuration bore a striking resemblance to Mesopotamian cuneiform scripts, and the world's first node-writing system. This resemblance was not vague or abstract. It was precise, structured, and evocative. Compelled by curiosity, I began comparing the symbols emerging from my diagram with characters from the Sumerian syllable, and the match was undeniable. From this graphical occurrence, a sequence of symbols emerged: JL, Z, and TH. Interpreting this through the Sumerian linguistic lens, I arrived at Gal Tzu. TH is the name of thought that is described in the Book of Death. In the Book of Death, thought is called Tehu. So Gal Tzu Tehu, a phrase that translates to the great past thought. This revelation, originating from a simple geometrical experiment, was too compelling to dismiss as coincidence. It insinuates something far deeper, a potential link between the primordial sacred knowledge encoded in the monuments of Giza and the mythological figure of thought, the gods of writing, wisdom, and time. Such a finding requires questions that challenge conventional narrative, of course. How is it possible that the Sumerian-like inscriptions appears encoded within the very geometry of the Giza complex, the heartland of the hieroglyphs? Could this suggest that both systems of writing, cuneiform and hieroglyphic, were born from a common primordial matrix, a sacred phonetic language of the god, preserved in symbolic architecture and cosmological alignment? In light of the broader framework of my research, particularly the theory of an advanced civilization existing around 36,000 before Christ, this discovery takes on even greater significance. It reinforces the notion that Giza was not merely a dynastic funerary complex, but the epicenter of a lost global language, a cosmic grammar expressed through architecture, astronomy, and studied seekers. The presence of a cuneiform-like eminence within this separate geometry may indeed reflect a unified edition code preset in stone by a civilization that understood the power of language not only to communicate but to create real reality. Thought Gal Tzu Tehu was more than a myth. It was the embodiment of this lost wisdom, and perhaps through the silent language of the pyramids, he is still speaking. While the phonetic language was yielded its initial results, and after astronomy had already provided astonishing insight in the profound relationships between the monuments and the star, a new threshold in the investigation was reached, one that required a further elevation of perspective. It was now time to approach the pyramids through what can be considered the most universal and incorruptible language, the language of the number. Unlike phonetics, word may evolve or myth, which may be reinterpreted, number transcends both space and time, remaining constant across civilizations, epochs, and dimensions of consciousness. It is the purest expression of order, rhythm, and creation. In its context, the Great Pyramid becomes not only a monument of a stone, but a monument of mathematics, a crystallization of cosmic highways. To initiate this analysis, I employed a clear tool, a mathematical tool, the prime factorization, the process to reducing a number to its most essential and indivisible constituents. Primes are the atoms of element, the building block of all numbers, and as such, they hold symbolic and energetic significance, and they both ancient and modern mathematical solutions. When this model is applied to the dimensions of the Presqu'île, an elegant simplicity emerges. The height of the pyramid resolves to the prime number 7, while the length of its base resolves to 11. These are not arbitrary values. They are both prime numbers, and their presence is the architecture indicates a delivered encoding of the mathematical truth. This numerical foundation suggests that the Great Pyramid was not designed arbitrarily, nor solely for functional or simple reason, but according to a sacred mathematical code. The choice of 7 and 11, in particular, opens several layers of interpretation. 7 is traditionally associated with cosmic order. The 7 classical planets, the 7 heavens, the 7 days of creation, and the several planets that we saw in the alignment of 36,400 before Christ. It is a number of confrontation and spiritual perfection. 11, on the other hand, is often seen as a master number, represented intuition, transcendence, and initial into higher knowledge, initiation into higher knowledge. In some traditions, it signifies the point of a transition from the material to the spiritual real. Together, 7 and 11 form a dyad that deflects the dual essence on the currents, rooted in the earth, but pointing to the acts, built in stone, yet resonating with number, massive in form but precise in proportion. Furthermore, these numbers may allude to deeper connection with mathematical constants such as pi and phi, both of which constantly appear in the proportion of the Great Pyramid. When viewed through the lens of prime factorization, the entire Giza project reveals itself as an algorithm of sacred geometry, the mastered work in which form, function, number, and bits converge. This analysis leads to an even more audacious question. Was the pyramid not only a temple of knowledge, but also a mathematical message encoded for future civilization? If so, the use of fundamental prime numbers suggests that its designers sought to communicate across the ages, using the one language that would remain eternally intelligible, the language of the number, the language of the gods. Continuing with this analytical approach with the period of Maeve, the smallest yet perhaps the most enigmatic of the three great periods, the application of the sign prime factorization model brought forth another compelling result. The number 5 for its height and once again the number 11 for its base. This repetition and variation within the same architectural family are far from coincidental. Rather, they reinforce the hypothesis that the dimensional structure of the pyramids was intentionally encoded with prime numbers, serving as maple keys in a larger symbolic and mathematical language. The number 5, like its counterpart 7 and 11, is a prime number, indivisible, essential and foundational. In the esoteric traditions and symbolic system of antiquity, 5 holds deep significance. It represents the human maker also, with its 5 deeps and 5 senses, the pentagram, and the union of the MEI principle, the 2, and the MEI principle 3. Heads symbolizing life, creation, and none. It is the number of the Hierophant and revealer of sacred knowledge in the mystery traditions. In light of this, one may begin to see the pyramids not merely as expression of royal power or funerary monuments, but also in this case as codified instruments of cosmic order, where each dimension is a syllable in sacred numerical language. The architectural plan or frontier ascension or pure function becomes the mathematical scripture and message expressed through the eternal constancy of number. And last, the Pyramid of Kappa. What secret does the Pyramid of Kappa conceal? At first, I approached its analysis with the expectation of discovering results consistent with those already observed in the Great Pyramid and Pyramid of Mukau. Simple prime numbers that, through their elegance and clarity, hinted at the intentional use of sacred mathematics. However, the Pyramid of Kappa defied expectation. Applying the same model, its dimensions resolve to a single, seemingly anomalous number, 137, for both the base and the height. At first glance, these results seemed to disrupt the patterns, but in truth, it led to the most profound revelation yet numerical codes of the pyramids. The number 137 is not just another prime. It is one of the most enigmatic and record constant in modern physics. It is the inverse of the fine structure constant, a dimensionless number that governs the states of electromagnetic interaction between elementary charge particles. This number is not arbitrarily assigned. It is woven into the very fabric of the universe. Physicists such as Richard Feynman, Wolfgang Pauli, but also Max Lederman, and even Albert Einstein were captivated by it. As Feynman famously said, all good theoretical physicists put this number up on their door and worry about it. The number 137 connects the 3 great pillars of modern physics: electromagnetism, governing light, radiation, and atomic interactions; relativity, describing the geometry of space-time; quantum mechanics, defining the probabilistic behavior of matter and energy at the smallest scales. Thus, the fact that Khafre pyramids embodies the number 137 in both its base and height is not a coincidence, but a deliberate encoding of the universe of God. It is a monumental cipher expressing a fundamental truth about the structure of reality, one that was known, perhaps intuitively or through an ancient science, by those who designed the Giza plateau. But the code does end there. When I applied the prime counting function phi of x, which estimates the number of prime numbers less than or equal to a given value, to the number 137, the result was 32. Again, a number alchemy with symbolic and metaphysical weights. The number 33 is traditionally associated with the highest degree of initiation in various esoteric traditions, the age of spiritual transformation, exemplified in the life of Christ, the vertebrae of human spine representing the Kundalini path of enlightenment, and breaking down 33 into its prime factors years 3 and 11. And once again, we return to the language already described into the other films, to unlocking hidden meanings, the mechanics by which opposites are reconciled to reveal a higher synthesis. Applied here, the pyramid of Khafre emerges as a turning point, the middle pillar between the Great Pyramid and Menkaure, containing the cosmic algorithm that harmonizes geometry, physics, and metaphysical actions. What then does this pyramid truly represent? Perhaps it is the architectural embodiment of the fine structure custom, a bridge between macrocosm and microcosm, a stone beat equation expressing the unchanging rhythm of life, matter, and time. Perhaps it is also a map of inversion of the journey from physical knowledge back to the spiritual region. Through the number 137, the Pyramid of Khafre becomes not just a relic of the lost civilization, but the gateway to architecture of the universe itself, and a bold declaration that the ancient knew far more than we are prepared to admit. Moving beyond the simple numerical derivations, the number 137, which emerges from our analysis of the Pyramid of Khafre, carries a multi-layered significance that merits deeper exploration. Firstly, its connection to the very fabric of our universe is profound. In the realm of theoretical physics, 137 is intimately linked to the fine structure of cosmos. Its precise value and its emergence in such a colossal edge structures compel us to consider whether this was a deliberate encoding of universal knowledge. Beyond this scientific interpretation, 137 carries a significant resonance. Across various ancient traditions, it is often seen as a number that evokes the deepest level of the Gaian's wisdom. This isn't merely about religious belief, but about the profound understanding of the universal principle, perhaps even the viewpoint of creation itself, suggesting a knowledge or and far exceeding what we typically attribute to ancient. In the realm of numerology, particularly within Hebrew Kabbalah, the sum of numerical value of the Hebrew letters forming Kabbalah itself, indeed total 137. This suggests a profound inner connection between this number and the very concept of receiving or transmitting divine mystical wisdom. It frames knowledge not just as intellectual acquisition, but as a spiritual unveiling. Finally, in terms of archetypes, the numerical value of 137 can be understood to signify entering the divine house of life. This archetype suggests a gateway, a profound initiation, or perhaps even a deliberate architectural design aids to aligning human experience with cosmic reasons. It prompts us to consider if the monuments themselves were designed not just as physical structures, but as symbolic houses or complex for a specific kind of knowledge or consciousness. The presence of this archetype within the structure's numerical essence points towards a highly sophisticated, symbolic, and possibly spiritual intention by its original victors. Finally, we delve into the more complex world on the archetypal architecture envisioned by the pyramid purpose. This involves examining the harmonic composition of the tables and their intrinsic connections with the language of symbols, through which scientific codes are manifested. The structure of the Valley Temple has consistently been a focal point of analysis throughout my studies, and it has always conveyed the distinct impression of being a type of electronic circuit board or even a microchip. Consequently, I meticulously analyze its structural aspects to ascertain if any numerical codes might be concealed within it. Immediately one can observe that on the left side there are 3 niches meticulously crafted from grades. The inner colonnade conversely comprises 16 columns. When reduced through numerological addition 1 plus 6, this yields the number 7. On the far left, there is yet another niche representing the number 1. The composition of these values numerically expresses the number 371 or 371, which is at first glance an anagram of the number 137. This aspect is in itself exceptional, curious, and thought property. Furthermore, precisely because we are discussing archetypes, meaning magic's language, I sought to verify possible assonances between these considered environments and the archetypal figures. I noted a peculiar relationship between the number 3 and the archetype she, whose meaning is she represents the transjuvated force. To she, man is reincarnated into a different entity during the body while still alive. The shape of the Hebrew she is believed to have originated from the design of the Egyptian funerary box, which transported and transfigured the deceased into the realm of the gods. The number 7, in contrast, appears to integrate with the meaning of the archetype Tau, due to its table-like shape and its meaning contemplation of creation. Lastly, the number 1 perfectly integrates with the archetype Tau by virtue of its form and its meaning, the fulfillment of the entire Vidya work of God. Why then the number 371? And why not 137, a code already found in the second pyramid, known as kappas? It became essential to understand what message this specific number might contain. Thus, I decided to apply a simple arithmetical code, similar to previous cases, to find a possible answer to this new message from the past. While I could then apply any formula to obtain a result that might satisfy my research in some way, I choose to apply the only arithmetical formula possible that contained a symbology linked to the ancient Egypt, and by extension to the gods themselves. The cross, the ankh, the key of life. And this choice was driven by the strong connection of the archetypal message to this very meaning. And in this specific instance, the only applicable formula utilizing the plus sign is the so-called sigma function. The function sigma of n number is an arithmetic function defined as the sum, so plus, of all the positive divisors of a natural number n. Furthermore, this formula is not distant from the applicability of previously used models, as it is inspired by a shared principle of analyzing quantities of values preceding a given value. Therefore, applying the sigma formula to the number 371, I obtained the result 432, and the significance of 432 Hz is well documented. It originates from a natural resonance with the frequencies that underlie both the human body and the universe, and the Valley Temple, through this precise code, was suggesting a profound message: immortality. The moment had the right to understand the source from which this principle originates. 137 connected with spacetime, and 42 linked to the concept of eternal life. The entirety of Egyptian mythology is built upon these two fundamental principles, particularly that of the eternal life and the concept of resurrection, which is so typical in mythology surrounding the deity Osiris. The Book of Death, the text pyramids, the coffin text, all these ancient writings share a single common denominator: eternal life. When this framework, another highly controversial text also emerges: Ymir tablet. While this is a challenging topic for discussion, we will attempt to analyze only certain aspects to ascertain their contents align with what is found in the established Egyptian texts. My attention to the Ymir tablets was by two primary objectives. First, to examine the physical description of the city of Ameti, or any structures connected to it, and second, the phonetics described in tablet 15 particularly stimulated my interest, especially in an attempt to discern if a magic language existed from which the phonetics of the earliest known civilizations such as Sumerian and Egyptian might have developed. These are the phrases described in the template 15. Whose meaning is currently thoroughly unknown. With Filippo's assistance, we endeavored to analyze the text and verify a potential phonetic conduct.
You read an hour of languages during the night.
And we observed that these phrases appear to resonate with Sumerian and certain proto-Semitic languages. Crucially, it became necessary to re-evaluate the transcription work of this text, as they appear to be inaccurate. Building upon our initial observations and reordering the ancient text, we have identified the key phrases that reveal highly interesting principles, directly correlated with the two numerical codes 137 and 42, discerned on the Isabel. These principles suggest a profound understanding inherent in the ancient worldview. The Temple of Thoth as an instrument of the spirits. This indicates a recognition of sacred structures serving as conduits for spiritual energy and knowledge. The instrument of spirits sets people free and awakens their awareness. This highlights the transformative power of spiritual knowledge to enlighten and liberate. It separates matter in order to serve the divine. This points towards an understanding of the divine's ability to transcend or manipulate the physical real for higher purposes. Praise the Son of God, the deity, rock upon which the works of the god are inscribed. This emphasizes the supernatural receptive geological formations, possibly associating them with divine creation of a historical record. And the primordial spiritual canopy forges the divine spirit within. This speaks to the inner transformative process, guided by a foundational spiritual force. From these tenets, we can infer that the primordial language possessed a unique nature. It was fundamentally based on frequencies, the logos, and this suggests a form of communication that did not inevitably require the written script. It is highly probable that written language only became integrated into daily life at a later stage, when it becomes necessary to specifically guide and facilitate the evolution of human beings. The prevailing academic consensus places the construction of the Giza pyramids firmly within the Old Kingdom, specifically during the 4th dynasty. However, a closer examination of the evidence reveals several compelling reasons to question this time, suggesting that these monumental structures may, in fact, belong to a much more robust class. The technical characteristics of these pyramids are demonstrably incompatible with the tools and knowledge prevalent during the 4th dynasty, the period when Akhenaten asserted these pyramids were built. The sheer scale and the precision of the stonework, coupled with the non-technological limitations of the Old Kingdom, present a significant challenge to the conventional narrative. Diving deeper, we encounter mysterious anomalies with the pyramids themselves. For instance, the king's chamber inside the Great Pyramid at Khufu is constructed with the enormous granite blocks, 10 for 5 meters of and weight of 80 tons. The precise working of these incredible hard materials, and particularly the sophisticated extraction techniques required, would have been beyond the capabilities of dynasty Egyptians. This raises fundamental questions about the methods and technologies employed by the original builders. Perhaps one of the most intriguing pieces of the evidence pointed to another construction is the presence of trace of water erosion on certain sandstone blocks on the Great Pyramid. While the other casing of the pyramids is largely missing today, these specific areas show clear signs of prolonged exposure to significant water flow. This suggests that at the same point at the same depth history, the outer casing in these particular sections had failed almost absent, exposing the underlying blocks to elements consistent with substantial rainfall or even flooding, conditions that have not prevalent in the Sahara Desert for thousands of years, potentially pushing the construction dates far back into wetter age. These points collectively challenge the conventional dating, inviting us to consider alternative timestamps and the possibility of a sophisticated civilization preceding the dynasty of Egyptians. The idea that ancient Egyptians used wooden wedges to extract massive granite blocks, as commonly suggested, is highly problematic. While possible for a softer stone like limestone, granite's extreme hardness and density make incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for the scale approaches seen at Giza. Wood wedges generate insufficient force to clean its braid, often leading to rubber fractures rather than precise cuts observed. Achieving the required control and uniformity for colossal blocks using this technique would have been nearly impossible. Furthermore, the extensive water needed for this process would have been a significant challenge in a chip's arid environment. Crucially, definitive archaeological evidence of wood sludge sacks for the use of large bready blocks is largely absent or highly contested. This discrepancy between theory and the tangible reality of the monuments compels us to question the conventional narrative and consider more sophisticated methods for breadth extraction. One of the most critical and often overlooked aspects of the pyramid construction involves the extraction and transportation of massive granite quartz from the porous of Aswan, located more than 900 kilometers south of Maeve. These blocks, some measuring approximately 10 by 5 meters and weighing up to 10 tons, to 7 tons, present a logistical challenge that surpasses the non-technological capabilities of the first Danese. Experts in quarrying operations understand that such an endeavor, requiring not only the precise cutting of stone but also its movement over vast distances, would have been virtually impossible using the copper tools and rudimentary techniques traditionally attributed to the ancient. The absence of the wheel and at that time further complicates the scenario, as it implies that these colossal blocks had to be hauled mainly across desert terrain. Even more astonishing is the fact that these blocks were eventually elevated to the heights of about 50 meters to form the king's chambers and the smog structure known as the jet. Given these extraordinary challenges, it becomes increasingly difficult to accept that such a feat was achieved solely by the builders of the latest period. The sheer consistency of the operation suggests an involvement of advanced planning and knowledge, perhaps the work of a genius whose understanding of engineering far exceeded that of his contemporaries. The known is found within the pyramids of Giza, particularly in the Great Pyramid and in the Second Pyramid, raises significant questions about the existence of unexplored passages. Suspicious architectural features, such as irregularities in the grave field, the wall built beneath the king chambers in the 1980s, and unusual blocks within the horizontal shafts leading to the so-called chambers appear deliberately designed to conceal access to unknown spaces. In this context, the use of synthetic aperture radar technology by the Carrowkeel Research Project is of critical importance. It enables researchers to see through solid stone structures and detect geometric anomalies that may indicate hidden chambers. Among the most frequently cited pieces of the elements in support of the mainstream deity of the Great Pyramid with the Fourth Dynasty is the Diary of Maeve, part of the Wadi al-Jawf papyri discovered in 2013. This set of administrative records, written on papyrus and attributed to an overseer named Maeve, describes the transportation of limestone blocks by boat from Tura to a construction site associated with Khufu, the Khufu Pyramid. Egyptologist, most notably Zaki Awas, that repeated this concept during his interview at the Joe Rogan Experiences, often reference this document as definitive proof that the Great Pyramid was constructed during its mere in ancient Egyptian, does not appear anywhere in the text. Instead, the site referred to is called the Akhet Bokuvu. The term Akhet, meaning horizon, is represented by a hieroglyph depicted the sun rising between two hills. While modern scholars have interpreted Akhet Okufu as a poetic reference to the Great Pyramid, this association is not explicitly supported by the text itself. In ancient Egyptian, the term used specifically for pyramid structure is mel, sometimes transliterated as per and s, or per and us, which translates as the house that rises up. This term clearly identifies a physical structure designed to ascend vertically, what we today recognize as a pyramid. By contrast, Akhet has a broader cosmological and geographical connection, referring to a sacred landscape or symbolic gateway between worlds. Therefore, the Akhet of Khufu may refer to the Giza plateau as a wall, a sacred site integrated into solar cult practices, rather than to the Great Pyramid itself. Zagyawas and other provenance of the Old Kingdom deity rely heavily on the dire of Maeve to reinforce the narrative that may, in fact, rest on the semantic misreading. By interpreting Akhet as equivalent to pyramid, they create a direct association that the text does not explicitly support. This methodological leaps allows to Hawking hypothesis to stand more firmly, but it does so on contested linguistic ground. In light of this, the Vajrayana papyri should be viewed not as definitive proof of the pyramid's construction dates, but rather as a valuable administrative record that may relate to broader royal works during Khufu's reign, without conclusively identify the greater pyramid itself as such. Long before the advent of advanced remote sensing technologies such as synthetic aperture radar, several scholars and independent researchers had already brought attention to the possibility of extensive subterranean structures beneath the Giza plateau. Among the earliest was the eminent Egyptian archaeologist Selim Hassan, whose detailed excavation and reports from the 1930s documented a number of anomalies beneath the surface. Hassan described in careful detail a series of shafts, chambers, and corridors that extended into the beta, many of which appeared unfinished or intentionally sealed. His findings suggested that the Giza plateau might harbor a hidden architectural layer largely ignored by mismatched interpretation. So this is not the first time that we talk about underneath structure under the Giza plateau. So the cover project doesn't discover nothing because just Selim Hassan discussed about a possible city under the Giza plateau. Later, the work of Akiva Arian, a custodian of indigenous Egyptian knowledge and oral traditions, contributed to this underground narrative, drawing from personal exploration and inherited wisdom we are consistently referred to the existence of vast network of natural and man-made cavities beneath Giza. He described this as part of a multi-level complex, not mere isolated caves, but interconnected system that played an integral role in the function and spiritual significance of the Giza monument. His claim, while often met with skepticism, helped keep interest alive with the idea of a hidden underworld at Giza. Most recently, Andrew Collins has provided a detailed re-examination of both historical accounts and modern explorations, particularly focusing on the area north of the Second Period, near the tomb of the designed NC2 or Tomb of the Birds. Collins suggests that what some interpret as natural features of limestone caves may in fact be part of the deliberately modified subterranean network. According to his hypothesis, this system was designed with architectural intent and may have once served ceremonial, storage, or even habitation purposes. While these early perspectives were largely marginalizing within academics and Egyptology, the CAFRE research project, through the application of SAR detection technology, has provided crucial new data that lets credibility into these early claims. Indeed, the project has validated the decades of speculation and empirical observation, offering a scientific foundation for the hypothesis that Giza is not merely a surface complex, but one that extends vertically into the earth. Thus, the work of a son, Osireion de Collins, can now be reassessed in light of emerging evidence. Far from being fringe or speculative, their insight for a vital historical and theoretical framework for interpreting the continuing revelation of the Giza underworld. The possible connection between the Giza plateau and the mythological concept of amenity represent a significant avenue of research in the ongoing effort to uncover the true function and meaning of the Giza complex. The term amenity also refers as Imentet or Abentet, originally referred to the goddess of the West, the symbolic guardian of the afterlife. However, a deeper linguistic analysis of the word Amenti reveals another meaning. It may be translated as seat or water of the divine power of life. This interpretation resonates with ancient Egyptian cosmology that life and rebirth are symbolically linked to hidden waters and divine energy beneath the earth. According to the ancient text, the number 137 is associated with the entrance into the divine house of life. In this interpretation, Giza itself becomes Amenti, not merely a physical location, but a sacred place where the divine mysteries of life that vibrate converge. If these descriptions are more than mere allegory, they suggest that the Giza plateau may conceal for more textile monuments. It may enshrine an ancient Southern geography, a multi-level architecturally integrated system designed not only to honor the dead, but to preserve and access the ideologies knowledge of the cosmos. The recent detection of large subface anomalies between the Giza by the CAFRE project's SAR technology offers scientific support for the possibility. The four Amenti may no longer be viewed solely as a metaphysical realm, it may in part be a physical reality in the living rock beneath Giza. One of the most intriguing elements found in the other tablet is the initial construction of Amenti, which is described as peat found upon the creation of deep wells intended to bring light and life into Amenti. This concept resonates strongly with the current archaeological landscape of the Giza itself. In particular, the areas near the eastern and western necropolises, adjacent to the pyramid, are marked by the presence of numerous vertical shafts. These wells are blocked or filled, and their true depths remain unknown to these days. It is plausible to consider that these shafts may be functionally or architecturally linked to the megastructure recently detected by the synthetic aperture radar beneath the Giza plateau. In this context, the wells described in the Emerald Tablet, sources of like for Amenti, may represent more than symbolic imagery. They could reflect a forgotten system of vertical access points engineered to connect the surface moments with the deeper, hidden components of a ancient underground complex. One of the defining features of the ancient Egyptian civilization is its integrate philosophy of duality. This concept permeates every level of its worldview, from the spiritual components of the human being, such as the Ka and Ba, to the dual expression of time, Neher, the cyclical sign, and Jet, the linear sign. Even practical aspects of the daily life, including measurement system, like the two version of the cubit, reflect this enduring logic of a dual balance and complementarity. Within this conceptual framework, the afterlife itself is not a singular destination, but a dual real. On one side lies Amenti, often interpreted as a hidden land, or west, the subterranean world of transformation and rebirth. On the other is Rostal, the ancient name for the Giza plateau, which translates as entrance of the passages. This term likely refers to both physical and metaphysical gateways, linking the surface world to deeper, concealed domain. The relation between Amenti and Rostal may be understood through the hermetic axiom as above so below. In this sense, Amenti, located in the underground or inner earth, can be seen as a mirror of reflection of Rostal, just as the visible structures of the pyramids correspond symbolically to Medusa, the celestial world tapped in the era of the Zetepi, the first star. Understood in this way, the Giza complex is not only a funerary or astronomical site, but a multidimensional interface between above and below, between earth and sky, between the material and spiritual realms. The architectural unitary project of the pyramids and associated monuments thus encodes a seismic cosmology, in which the dual to the sky is reflected through the Rostal of Giza, which in turn grants access to Amenti, the hidden source of renewal and divine knowledge. Such an integrated interpretation computes a re-evaluation of Giza, not as an isolated site, but as the central axis of a spiritual system encoded in the landscape itself. The image encapsulates the profound relationship between Amenti, Rostau, and Tuatha, three interconnected levels that embody the hermetic principle as it also below. Within this symbolic framework lies the essence of the entire Egyptian cosmology, which is fundamentally inspired by the cycle of birth, death, rebirth. To the east, we find the Sphinx, guardian of the three-dimensional spiritual, and a symbol of birth associated with the rising sun and the beginning of the life cycle. To the south, the pyramids represent the culmination of human scientific and spiritual knowledge acquired through the course of earthly existence. To the west, the tomb of the earth and the entrance to the underworld symbolically represent that, the passage from the visible to invisible world. Finally, the journey continues in Amenti through the 12th hour of the night, as described in the book of the Ether Chambers of Tuatha. This is the sacred space of regeneration, both of body and soul, a place of transformation that prepares for the earth. This rebirth takes place once again in the east, symbolically beneath the pulse of the Sphinx, where the new cycle of life begins. This is the great mystery precept at Giza, a sacred landscape that encodes the eternal process of spiritual evolution through the eternal plane of light and shadow, life and death, matter and spirit. My research offers a distinct departure from conventional Egyptology, aiming to bridge the perceived transfer between ancient myth and scientific history. I propose the Giza pyramid are not buried tombs or resinous molecular markers, but proofful instruments encoding both symbolic and scientific functions, directly linked to a much earlier epoch. As detailed in my book, The Secrets of the Gods, the Giza complex with its deep subterranean structures stands as a testament to a primordial civilization of the gods that migrated after Golda cataclysm like the Thomas super eruption. This site was central to a new era founded on advanced knowledge, including an understanding of frequencies and the logos as ancient texts suggested. Ultimately, I contented the periods as tangible evidence of sophisticated, lost civilization whose wisdom locally cycles a universal principle, resonate with symbolic code. This research fosters a more integrative approach to understanding the true depth of our shared human history, and I am prepared for the necessary field excavation to advance the work. Thank you for listening.
All right, so the first part of the conference thus far has been Armando Mei's presentation on the timeline and the impetus for the implementation of the synthetic aperture radar technology. And part two, we're going to dive into the new technical data with the presentation from Filippo Biondi, and I think we got Corrado Malanga on the screen up there now, who's going to be joining the conference virtually. It's been extremely interesting thus far. I was just talking to Armando about how critical it is to be able to establish a timeline, a place of origin, and again, the impetus for any specific theory and he provided some reasonably compelling information in his presentation. I don't necessarily agree 100% with all of it, but I can certainly see the mindset behind what they are trying to not necessarily prove, but provide evidence for the existence of the halls of Amenti, these underground features on the Giza plateau. And of course, I agree that the construction and operation of the Egyptian pyramids predates the conventional dynastic timeline. So I'm on board with some stuff. It's been super interesting thus far. I think we're about an hour and a half in. It's been quite a wild ride thus far, and now we're about to, there's one of the organizers of the conference, Simone, our good friend from Malta. Exceptional job, Simone. You and Thomas did a great job.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, thank you to Simone and Thomas for inviting us to Malta. You met Thomas. What's up? Say what's up to the YouTube
Hello,
community.
what's up?
You're going to be famous, yeah.
Subscribe.
Like subscribe. All right, so now we're gonna buckle in, and we'll keep on recording the whole thing. That's my homie Thomas, who was with us at the Gozo sites the other day. We've had a really great time, and it's an exceptional opportunity to meet people with different ideas. And just because you don't 100% agree, you know, they may not agree with mine, I may not agree with theirs, but the sharing of the information is what is going to get us closer to understanding the truth about our ancient history, which I think is the goal for all of these type of conferences and projects. So with that being said, let's go. All right, everyone, that is it for today's video. This was episode 163, the exceptional presentation by SAR team member Armando MEI, explaining his research on the numerology of 137 and its connection to the Central Pyramid of Giza. I really hope you enjoyed today's video, and then the next episode in the series, part 2 of our investigations of the bizarre structures of ancient Malta. This is an episode you do not want to miss, so if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube. If you're interested in the technology of an ancient civilization utilizing physics and chemistry and the function of the Egyptian pyramids and other ancient structures from across the world, please like, comment, share, and stay tuned. If you want to help support the channel and get access to exclusive research content, check out the Land of Chem members only channel and thelandofchem.com if you want to pick up a copy of the book or grab some merch. Today, I'm rocking Ancient Odysseys merch from my wife Alexa's channel, also linked in the video description below. Also, don't forget, after you finish watching this video, please go subscribe to our 3 other channels, Ancient Odysseys, Let's Go with Lex and G, and the best channel on YouTube, Egyptian Trash Cats. For all you cat lovers out there, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. I think that's it for today's episode. So I will see you next time. Yo, are you still watching this? Please subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube and click that little notification button. New videos coming out every single week. And check out this other episode. Come on, do it. Do it now.